What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today we're going to be discussing a topic that I think is overlooked a lot of the time and is probably more common than not, and that is the length of your release. And what I mean by the length of your release is the length of the shank here, from like the strap to where the trigger is, because almost all of them are adjustable these days, whether they screw in and out or have different slots with a set screw. But I'm gonna start with one that in my opinion is too long and then show you one that's too short and kind of go over how the correct release length kind of plays into anchor point and shot execution and basically overall accuracy. So what I see a lot are releases that people set the length of them when it's at rest in their hand is comfortable, but then once they get back to full draw and that string's pulling against it, it lengthens out a little bit or slides up over their wrist a little, and they have to either hang on to the release to reach the trigger, or even if they have their fingers open, it just comes right here on the tip of their fingers. So then they get this kind of flappy motion to get it to fire instead of being able to just hook and pull straight back on the trigger. So usually when a release is too long like that, even if my draw length is correct, so it comes in, when I come in and relax these fingers, you see how that's just right on the very tip of my finger there? So as I'm squeezing, I'm actually not just pulling straight back on that trigger, I'm actually putting downward pressure on it. And what happens with that is, at 20 yards, you're not gonna see a big difference, but at further distances, any pressure that's applied to that loop is gonna be generally applied into the back end of the arrow as well. And, the back of your arrow or the tail of your arrow is basically like the rudder of a ship, and it takes a small rudder to steer a giant ship. So it takes hardly any torque or manipulation of the back of my arrow to cause a big miss downrange. So on top of, putting downward pressure on there, the other thing I see a lot of the time is people, they hang on to the release. So they come in and they got a death grip on the shank of it in order so it doesn't slide way forward on them. So they got a death grip on it, and then they come in and they hook that trigger. And the problem with this is, watch what happens. So here's squeezing, here's releasing. Squeezing, releasing. Squeezing, releasing. You can watch the back of that loop basically, or in this case, the end of this rope. When I'm squeezing it, it pushes it in towards my mouth. When I let go, it moves back away from my cheek. So if I'm hanging on to that release, pardon me, I feel like a 13-year-old with his voice cracking. If I'm hanging on to that release, when I squeeze the trigger and the release lets go of the loop, that arrow is gonna come out away from my face. That pressure towards my face is gonna release, and that arrow is gonna come right out of the bow, kicking out and away from me like that. And you're gonna have a lot of issues tuning, because it's very hard to recreate the exact same amount of pressure when you're hanging on to the release like that every time. Whereas if I am relaxed, all these swivels on these releases are just gonna pull in a straight line, kind of like a plumb bob. Everything's just gonna pull in a straight line, and you're gonna get a lot cleaner release. So what I want you to try, if this is an issue for you, I'm gonna put on my personal release now. It's going to feel very short and awkward and stubby at rest, and I'll show you kind of where this sits. So you can see here, the release basically only comes right to where my fingers come into my palm here. But what that allows me to do at full draw, come back, I draw, I can relax all these fingers and just come right around that trigger. So you see where that trigger is? It's right at the base of that second knuckle. And what that allows me to do is I can keep these fingers relaxed. This finger hooks that trigger, and now I'm pulling straight back on that trigger. I have no torque on the release. I'm not squeezing the release here. Everything is nice and in line. My forearm is relaxed, and that knuckle is hooked around that. So as I'm aiming, I'm squeezing, 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 boom, and the shot fires. So everything's coming straight back. I'm not flapping down on that. Essentially what I want to achieve with my hand is, my hand's just in a relaxed position like this. If it's just completely relaxed, I want that trigger to be able to just be inserted right here. So when I get back, you can hang on to the release when you draw, obviously, but then once you get back and you anchor, bring those fingers, let go, drop that one over the trigger, and that trigger should just be sitting right here. And that allows me to pull straight back on the trigger. It makes it a lot easier to not punch it. It's, I don't know the exact number, but there's a heck of a lot more nerve endings right on the end of your finger than there is in like your second knuckle. So you don't have quite of a touchy, like feathery feel to it. It's a little duller and you can just kind of hook it and pull through. Again, I'm not squeezing it, getting any torque on there. That's really, really important. So I'm gonna kind of show you what this looks like now on my actual bow. Let me grab my bow. So first we will do my release. So see, I hang on to it when I get back, then I just relax, bring that finger right over that trigger. There's no torque being induced. Right there. Now I'm gonna put on the one that's too long. And I'm not changing my draw length at all, but you're gonna see that my backhand is essentially now floating. So if I wanted to if I was shooting a release that's too long and I wanted to get my hand, closer to my face, I would basically be shortening my draw length. And even though that's unnecessary. So you're just shorting yourself on draw length if your release is too long. So this one's gonna be, so this is that True Fire again. There we go. So we're here. Now see, you can see, even when I anchor here, my hand is not even touching my face. So I'm all the way back here. And I just have to like punch it. Sorry, phone's going off. So again, even if I had, even though I didn't change my draw length at all, just because my release is too long, now my hand is floating way the heck back here and I have no contact on my jaw there. So play around with this a little bit. It's a really, really common thing that people shoot too long of a release. And I don't want to say the shorter the better, but you want to get it to where kind of how I was showing, where you can come around, relax that hand, get a good hook on that trigger and squeeze it off. Now, you're probably your peep height is going to most likely change because as this hand comes closer, I'm going to be able to pick that head up a little bit more. Your peep sight's probably going to be a little bit low. Don't adjust your head to see through the peep sight. Cut your tie loose, move your peep sight to your anchor point. Like once you find that comfortable anchor point, when everything looks the way I was just describing, move your peep sight. Don't come in and say, oh, well now my peep sight's too low and pull your hand way up here to see through it. You want to adjust your peep height to your anchor point, not your anchor point to your peep height, if that makes sense. So if you guys have any more questions on this, please feel free to either comment below or send a picture or a video to me. It's hard to do like a head to toe form critique, but if it's something simple, like, hey, is my draw length look too long, or, does my release hand look okay, whatever, I can usually, give you some feedback pretty quickly on that. So anyway, thanks for watching today. Remember, precision is a decision. Keep them in the middle, and I'll see you on the range.